What's up, everybody? This is Alex from WMD back at you again. This time we are going to be talking about the Arpitecht in conjunction with the METRON trigger sequencer. So the Arpitecht and the METRON are really a match made in heaven. They were kind of designed around each other. We were actually designing the METRON as we were designing the Arpitecht. So while we were developing it, we were using METRON all the time. And now that METRON's out, I think it's a really good opportunity for me to kind of show you the workflow that we've been using for a long time and just kind of give you some insights in how to use the Arpitecht usefully. So what I've got going on is I've got a spectrum oscillator running into the pole zero filter and then just straight into the mixer. One thing that a lot of people don't know about the pole zero is that it has a built-in VCA. So I've just got the output of my envelope here molted into the VCA of the pole zero as well as the FM input. So we're kind of just killing two birds with one stone there. Getting two birds stoned at once, as they say. So real quick, one thing we can do with the Arpitecht is we can use it as a quantizer. So I'm just going to turn up the notes knob all the way, and we're just going to use this scale, but you can find any scale that you like. And if you have transpose down all the way, in the middle, or all the way to the right, you're starting your root note at C. So it's a really easy way to see what scale you're in. And then if you want to change your root note, you can just transpose from there. So we're going to stick in C. And my spectrum oscillator is not necessarily tuned to C. It's just that's what we're looking at on the Arpitecht. So what we're going to do is we're just going to take an output of voltage block, run it into the input, and we're going to take a gate output from METRON. And we're going to molt this gate input, or this gate output, and we're going to run it into the voltage block's clock CV input, the clock input of the voltage block. And so now we'll just start our METRON and we will just send it some gates. So I'm just going to go 15, channel 15's going in there. And you can see I've got a little 4-channel sequence here. I'm going to make that 4 steps. Now it's 16 steps, right? And so now we're just quantized to the scale. So I can move around here and we're just kind of recording that CV and I can make a pretty cool sounding sequence. So I'm just gonna put in a kick drum for to keep myself sane here. And there it is, right? We're done. That's music. So we can change this up a little bit. And if we want to take some notes out, we just turn the notes knob down. So now we're restricted to only playing these 4 notes out of the scale. So this is a super useful use case. This is a really easy way to use the Arpitecht to just quantize your notes and just kind of keep it in key and just kind of be a little bit more directed with your sequences. Voltage block obviously does have its own quantizer, but a lot of modules don't, like the pressure points or orbitals or the Doepfer analog sequencer. Any analog style sequencer isn't going to have a quantizer built in, so the Arpitecht is really useful for that. Also, if you just want to use less notes than an entire scale or make a custom scale, it's a little bit easier to do just by turning this notes knob. So that's one way to use the Arpitecht. And to be honest, I never really use it like this. This is a really simple way to do it, and like I said, very useful. But what I like to do is use it as an arpeggiator and kind of as my melody generator, right? So instead of using this gate, what we're going to do is we're going to take the gate input from the envelope and we're going to plug in the gate output of Arpitecht. And we'll just clear our sequence here. And I'm going to go out of channel 13 of the METRON, and I'm going to run it into step input, the step input on Arpitecht. And now I'm going to use the output right next to it, 14, to go into the input right next to step, which is reset. So now I can just drag in some notes here. And we're running through these notes. I'm going to turn the notes knob all the way down, so now we're just running through octaves. Now, a really useful thing is to just reset the sequencer and make the sequence stay on the root note. So we can do that here, and we can just kind of make it run through the sequence only, or the arpeggio only at specific times. So again, we'll turn on that kick drum just to keep some time so we know where we're going. And again, we're already making music. This is pretty cool, right? We can go back here, we can change up the rhythm of our gate input, of our steps. So I'll just turn off some notes there. And I'm already into this. So a lot of times with the Metron, I'll just literally do stuff like this, where I'm just using one note. And I'll just make a bunch of different variations with different rhythms. So I'm gonna go ahead and do this while we're still listening to A. So right now I'm editing variation C. And one thing I like to do is make these rhythmic things. So just like all these little reset guys here, and then just run through the trill at the end. And this last one we'll just do through the octaves a bunch. And actually this one will make more of an Italo kind of line. So this one we're gonna reset on the downbeats, and then we're gonna put another step on the upbeats. So let's listen to what we've created. So here's B. Now we'll listen to C. My kick drum disappeared, so we're just gonna put that kick drum back in. Now here's D. And then here's E. So I've got 5 different variations here that I can just switch between that are all different rhythms. And we're just using one note on the Arpitect, cycling through the octaves with a super simple subtractive voice. All right, so I'm gonna clear those out. We'll start over real quick. And this time I want to make more of like an Italo kind of line, right? So I'm just going to make this like kind of thing. So we're just going to, like we did earlier, do resets on the downbeats and then one more on the upbeats. And now we've just got cycling through octaves. I can add a little bit of character at the end just by putting some more steps in there and not have any reset info. And now let's make this move around. So now I'm gonna use voltage block, and I'm gonna plug this into Transpose. And now we're just gonna move these notes around on different steps. All right, so now I can manually cycle through. So with that, we can just make some progressions on the root, right? Just change it around. And so what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna just change voltage block with Metron instead of doing it by hand. So I'm gonna take my channel 15 and I'm gonna run that into the clock input on voltage block. And then I'm gonna take channel 16 and I'm just gonna run that into the reset of voltage block. So now on beat 1, of the first bar, I'm just gonna make sure that we always reset. I'm gonna make this a 4-bar pattern, duplicate pattern length, makes that super easy. And now on every other downbeat, I'm just gonna make us change chords. And we'll reset back on 2 there. Whoops, we'll reset on 3, so the second time through. And then we'll do a little bit more. There we go. So now we've got a 4-bar pattern, and we're just transposing the root around. We're still just using one note going through the octaves. So this is a really valid way to use it. So let's change up our gate pattern a little bit. We'll go back to page 1. There we go. And I'm gonna add some gate length here. go. And yeah, again, we can just take this out, and I'm just going to duplicate pattern length, but only for that track. And now we'll make this a 4-bar pattern. And we're still doing our thing with this octaves, but now we've got a little bit different of a rhythm going. So this is a really good area to practice and just get good at this, just like making some cool progressions and just some movement, and just kind of figuring out how to do this best in your own way to suit your own style, right? And then to take it a little bit further, we can work on sequencing different aspects of the Arpitecht instead of just transpose. So I'm going to take out the cable that went into transpose. We're going to go back into just a single bar pattern, and we're going to clear the tracks that are going into voltage block. And so now I'm going to run my channel out of voltage block, and I'm going to go into the notes input. So now I can change what notes Arpitecht will cycle through. And a cool way to do this one is to kind of do that rhythmic thing I was talking about earlier. So all right, I like that 2-bar pattern, so we're going to do it like this. So we've got a little bit of variation. Bar 1's just a tiny bit different than bar 2. And so now I'm going to do the same thing we did with transpose, but just with the notes knob, or with the notes input. So I'm going to go to step 2, and we'll choose like a different shape here. All right, so now I'll do a third one here. And this one, I want it to start on a different note. I don't want it to always start on C, right? So in order to do that, I can just disable the root, and now only these 3 notes are going to play. And I can also do that with CV. So I'm going to take channel 2, and I'm going to plug that into the root here. And whenever voltage is present, we'll turn the root on there. So whenever voltage is not present now, we're going to not have the root. So we'll go back here, and we'll make sure all these have the root. There we go. So now I've got a three-step pattern. And so I'm just going to now step the voltage block the same way we were doing transpose to change those notes. So we'll start here. So again, I'm just resetting voltage block on step 1 of bar 1, and then I'm stepping through for the rest of the pattern. So one common, I don't want to call it a mistake, but one common use that I've seen a lot of people do that I think confuses them is running something like an LFO or a sample and hold into notes, or trying to use a really fast sequence, like every 16th step it's a different chord shape. And that can get you some pretty cool results, but it's not going to be as, how should I say, purposeful, or it's not going to be as intentional. So it's a really good idea to use slow sequences, and that's why I like to start with no stepping on the voltage block and just manually changing the steps and figuring it out and like playing along with just the buttons before I make any sort of connection for the clock to take over the sequencer. So that's pretty much it. I mean, Arpitecht is a very simple module once you get the hang of it. I'd like to hear if anybody else has some fun, cool techniques on using it, but this is just the super simple, basic way of getting started with it. As far as like the slide and the rhythm knobs, I usually just keep those all the way down because I'm using METRON as my rhythmic center. Those are a lot more useful for when you're just sending it 16 steps and you want it to generate its own rhythm. But because we have METRON and we have it being the rhythmic center of our entire Eurorack system here, I just choose to put those knobs where they won't affect the sequence at all. So thank you guys so much for watching. If you have any requests or anything you'd like to see me do as far as, you know, modular synth-wise, please just put them in the comments or send me an email or a DM or whatever. And please like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Thanks so much.